So yeah, let's see. Gen Z quietly gave up and nobody noticed. Um, yeah, I also gave up, but I wasn't really quiet about it. But also, nobody noticed. I gave up knowingly.
A thread that was quite interesting. The
So
title
let's take a
was,
look.
"What's it like being in your 20s in the UK these days?" And even if you're not in the UK or 20s, I bet you'll be able to relate to the top answer. Let me read it out for you. What's the point? I'm renting and I would love to buy a house, but what's the point? I'll likely never pay it off. I'm paying loads into a pension, but what's the point? I'm going to be working until I die. I'd like to see a doctor about some minor ailments, but what's the point? There's never any appointments anyway. If you couldn't tell...
So yeah, let's just rewind there. So, yeah, I relate to a lot of this. You know, you don't have to be Gen Z to feel this shit. I guess I'm a millennial for sure. And it says, I'm renting and would love to buy a house. What's the point? So I actually just bought my first house. I'm 100% sure I will never pay it off for the rest of my life ever. It is, even though the interest rate we got is really good, and we put like a pretty decent sum down, even though it was nowhere near 20% like all the books say you should do. We actually put down 3.5%. Which was about $8,000, and it was really hard to save, believe it or not, for that. You know, we bought it. But the reason we did it though is because our mortgage payment is actually cheaper than the rent of all the areas like apartments and things around us. So our house payment's actually $1,750. So we actually got a deal for moving from a $1,900 apartment. And we actually got a house. So that is a positive if you have good credit. But yeah, you'll never pay it off. I know I'm never going to pay it off. And my children's children will probably never pay it off. Let me be very real with you. Paying loads into a pension, what's the point? I'm going to work until I die, 100%. My 401k, I'm hoping they just cash it out to me at a certain age and, you know, just accept I'm going to die working. And then I like to see a doctor about some minor ailments. In America here, you also die. You just wait to die.
If you couldn't tell, this is going to be a video that is brimming with optimism. But I think there's an important message to be made here. If you've
It's to die. Just die.
clicked on this, I'm going to assume that to at least some degree you can relate to the sentiment that this user has posted. In fact,
Yep.
I came across a study that found that over half of young people agree with the statement that humanity is doomed. And if I wanted to convince you otherwise, I could tell you that child mortality has dropped by half in the last 20 years. Or...
Yeah, so here's the thing about any positivity in the world. People nowadays will spin any positivity to be due to a conspiracy or bettering another company. So take the child mortality one, for example. You know, what they're doing is feeding us better and trying to keep us alive longer so they can have more wage slaves to, you know, cuck and fill with medications to pump more profits out of. Because guess what? When the drug user dies, you don't make any more money off of them. So you profit if you keep them alive longer. So that's what I mean by you can take any positive and turn it into a negative very easily. I do that all the time in my life. It's great.
any other bunch of random stats, but I don't think they actually convey anything helpful for most of us. I want you to stick with me for the next few minutes because I think we can actually go in a more useful direction. And on the off chance that the random Reddit user FroyoFlashy6048 is watching this one's for you, bro. So the sentiment expressed in that comment is hardly something uncommon, and just like absolutely everything that my generation has done, they've turned it into a meme. The meme is called the Doomer.
The Doomer.
Presumably some of you aren't chronically...
That's what Gen Z does, dude. They, bro, they're so depressed, they have to make jokes. You know what? They say, fucking the most depressed people are the funniest. That's why Gen Z is so funny, man. They're just broken people. Oh my god.
And aren't entirely familiar with
we got a bunch of zombies.
And so I want to give you...
Bro, Gen Z is Generation Zombie, bro. They're just walking around corpses.
The definition as described by one of my favorite channels on YouTube, Pursuit of Wonder.
Nah, man.
The Doomer is an individual who's in their early 20s. He or she is someone who feels a sense of aimlessness or loneliness. and is consequently stricken with a deep despair for life. For the doomer, life is meaningless, and the world is inevitably doomed by humanity's ignorance, greed, and futility.
Yeah.
As a result, the doomer sees little to no reason in engaging in traditional pursuit.
That's why I think every doomer out there should get married, because then you can have somebody to be depressed with. It feels so much better. The loneliness portion still stays in the fact that you know the world is going to die, but at least somebody else feels a mutual understanding that the world is doomed and you're all going to die. So it's very warming to be depressed together.
And retreats from society into apathetic
100%,
isolation.
10 out of 10.
Now, if this description is at all relatable to you, as it was for me, then I want you to stick with me for the next few minutes, because understanding a little bit about why this phenomenon is so prevalent nowadays might give you a few tools in your arsenal to help you deal with these feelings.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So, brief aside, there are a lot of people in the world right now who are materially affected by quite tragic circumstances.
Yeah.
And I'm not aiming to invalidate anyone who does feel that way. What I want to focus on is...
Hey, anybody in the chat, hey, listen to this. Everybody gets to feel... Oh, thanks for the follow, man. I very much appreciate you, Daddy. So here's the thing. People get to feel things regardless of their situation. We're all human. Yes, there's people starving in third world countries. Yes, there's people that have it worse than you, right? But you are a human. You're allowed to feel. Like, you can feel whatever, you need to, man. Like, if you need to cry because, you can't afford food that week, or you need to cry because you're just having a bad day, like, your feelings are not invalidated, man. Like, you deserve to feel too. So I struggled with this a lot personally, is I would always subjugate my feelings and put them behind me because somebody always had it worse than me. And that doesn't change the fact that people do technically have it worse than you, but you are still allowed to feel. Like, you are still allowed to be human, man. So
instead a sense of disillusionment, a feeling of disconnection from the social environment that a lot of people feel right now. And I'd like you to keep that in mind when watching the rest of this. Okay, thanks. So, if I asked you, why has a generation in the face of these gigantic issues chosen to give up en masse? You might give a few different answers. Some of you might say something like this. Well, people these days just don't want to work for what they want. This generation has just decided to choose the easy way out instead of facing the struggles head on. To which I would say, well, why do we assume that giving up is the easy option? Let's try listening, and maybe we might reach a different conclusion entirely. I find it very difficult to say that doomerism is an easy way out when it's not really a way out of anything. It doesn't relieve any particular individual of the stress and the trauma of human behavior at large, and I don't think it necessarily frees you from anything. This angle, I feel, is most often brought forward by people from a different generation who fundamentally had a different contract between
It's those fucking boomers. I knew it.
them and society.
It's like an episode of freaking, it's like an episode of Scooby-Doo, man. It's like, who's making us depressed? Let's see who it is. Whoop! It's a boomer!
Large.
Fuck!
People who lived a large part of their young adulthood.
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you ugly Gen Z kids. You fucking woke turds.
Time of optimism. A time where it seemed like hard work would actually genuinely be rewarded. What I think we see when we look at doomers is a group of people who feel one of two ways: misled or powerless. It's a group of people that is bombarded with messaging that tells them that their efforts are futile. They feel like the contract between...
Nah, let me tell you something, baby Gen Z. I'm a millennial, so I'm gonna tell you straight. Your efforts are futile, okay? From somebody who's been doing it for quite a little bit now, I feel like I'm actually in a pretty good position. I make a decent wage. Actually, I make more than most of the median in my area, and guess what? I still feel like I will never, ever, ever feel safe financially. I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm 50% more wealthy than everybody in my median range, and I will never, ever, ever feel safe financially, okay? It doesn't get better. And I'm maximum doomer on this unless we change it. And I hear that all the time, unless we change it. But we have to let these old bitches die,
Society
man. They gotta die first. I think that's the only way.
And thus there's nothing we can do but resign ourselves. And so I don't think it's fair to characterize doomerism as a choice necessarily, as a conscious decision to give up and choose ease of life, because it's not any easier than any other mode of life. Rather, it's a mindset.
Nah, bro. Giving up, you know what it is? Giving up is it's it's still having to deal with life, but now you're just sad on top of it, so it sucks more.
That one develops after losing the so-called naive optimism you might have as a younger person. And some of you might agree with that. Some might even take the idea further and say something like this. Okay, so I get what you're saying. It sounds to me like doomerism and apathy are almost like a rational response. Why would anyone bother caring when facing these issues such as climate change and retirement? It seems to me like the sensible, rational thing to do is to give up, right? And at one point in my life, I would have agreed with this. But lucky for me, you're allowed to change your mind. I would even encourage it. See, I believe that most people in my age group are genuinely passionate about certain things. We do face this issue, however, that we are constantly told that our efforts are futile. And in such an environment, the overwhelmingly sensible thing to do seems to be not bother. But I don't necessarily think that that's an inherently rational way to respond. In fact, when it comes to human behavior, rationality is the exception rather than the rule. And
True.
I think keeping that in mind is really important when it comes to challenging thought patterns that can be unhelpful to you. The idea of rationality in human decision making was kind of the motivation for this entire piece, specifically the work of Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist who specializes in that area. His most famous piece of work is probably the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and in it there's one specific idea that I wanted to share. I actually came across Thinking Fast and Slow in a bookshop recently, and it got me thinking about the subject of rationality. I'd read the book years ago, but thanks to today's sponsor, Shortform, I was able to get a really quick overview of the main ideas. I've found that the books on Shortform are way more useful than like a normal book.
Hey, I let the ads play, alright? He put a lot of work into this. You're gonna watch the damn ad, alright? Or you can get the fuck out.
Summary, they come with these neat little exercises to test your knowledge, and they also have references and sources to all of the material inside the book. They have books on psychology, science, economics, and just about everything else. So I really do think that there's something for everyone there. I've used a few services like this before, but what I really liked about Shortform is that they made it super easy for me to dive deeper into specific areas and ideas that I found interesting. And I didn't have to commit undue time and energy to learn the things that I wanted to learn. If you too are interested, then you can get 5 days of unlimited access.
I like how he did that with his ad, actually. So at the bottom, you can see a yellow bar moving. That means, like,
To thousands of
really
books
courteous
and
of him,
a 20% discounted annual subscription through my link,
but that's crazy.
shortform.com/fads. Thank you to Shortform for sponsoring this piece. Let's get back to it. So the specific idea that really resonated with me goes along the following line. When trying to answer the question, what do I think about X? You tend to think about the easier but misleading question. What do I remember about X? And how easily do I remember it? The more easily you remember something, the more significant you perceive it to be. When we're surrounded by...
And that's why we're in such a gutter financially. Because tell me the last time, genuinely, where you ever were like, man, that was financially easy. Man, I feel secure. Give me an example. Unless you are an oil prince, I guarantee you don't have one.
Information that's designed to make us...
You go to the dollar store now, and it's like the $1.99 plus. You know, they go to the dollar store, they have the freaking dollar and beyond section now. Nah, bitch. That's so crazy to me. Like, that's brain melting. Like, you can't even get it for $1 anymore like you used to.
Just feel powerless, then naturally we resign ourselves to feeling powerless. But there is another thing worth noting, and that's that time and time again, the people who have had the most impact, the people who've been heralded as leaders of movements, have been those who've behaved in a way that's inherently irrational. Their behaviour would only ever really make sense in retrospect. Now, I'm not saying that me or you is going to be able to solve huge systematic inequalities within our lifetimes. We have no ability to predict the impact of our behaviour throughout and beyond our lifespan. What we do have an ability to do, though, is to commit to values that we believe to be true, and to focus on seeing those values represented in people immediately around us. Whenever the kind of doomer mindset tries to come back to me, I do remember the fact that, for the most part, most people will not be remembered for their actions. But that does not mean that their actions do not have lasting consequences.
I will say I am a positive doomer, okay? Based on his description, I am married. Like I said, I think everybody should find a significant other to be a doomer with. It enhances the experience. But I would say I'm a positive doomer in the sense that eventually all the people that are, causing this turd show to happen will die, and we can hopefully make it better. Hopefully we'll all be on the same page by then. I'm hoping as little Gen Z and millennial people are getting brainwashed by the existing turds out there, so that way we have a clean future. So I'm going to try to be positive that eventually, maybe when I'm 50, when everybody else that has crazy mindsets about, having to, that grind set, mode of thinking will be dead, and we can actually move forward and be people.
Consequences. I would, for example, challenge you to name more than, say, 10 people who are actively involved in the civil rights movement. And yet, it took the collective effort of millions of people to bring about change. And I think that's true for any issue that you care about. The people whose impact ends up affecting change are those who behave in a way that we would deem irrational. Because what humans would describe as rationality, I think, is more analogous to just talking about the status quo. We believe that whatever exists makes sense. I, for a long time, was a doomer, but I do think that things are starting to change. I'm starting to see the value of adding my voice to a collective, and accepting that it doesn't matter really whether or not that voice is actually heard. What matters is that I've made a concerted effort to make it.
I think this is a good point. In a lot of my content, I constantly am telling people that nobody gives a fuck about you. And I know people get offended by that sometimes. And, I'm sorry you do get offended by that. But I think he's putting it in a much nicer tone. Nobody does give a fuck about you. But your values and the thing you propagate to society will matter. Okay? So there are things that you do that do matter. That's why you should always take each day, to be the best you can be, and, lead by example. Lead yourself by example. Even if nobody follows you, lead by example, okay? Because how you act is it's going to leave an impact on somebody eventually on how you acted, and hopefully that influences them to be the same. So be the individual you want the world to see.
Get heard within the people who are immediately around.
Even if it's just
and
you.
That approach to life has made me a lot less fearful.
Person.
Living by values that you believe to be true is the only power I think we have. And no matter how rough or how bad things feel like they're going to be, it's a power that you'll always have. So why not try and use it?
Cheers.
Yeah.
That was a really good video. Boys, I'm gonna take a leave of absence for just a bit. I'm gonna hop off, stop the stream for a bit. Feel free to come back. But I am going to go eat my Stouffer's lasagna. But I will be back. Probably gonna watch this last video today. I have some more on my bucket list, but I do want to save those for whenever. And then maybe I'll play some Diablo or whatever. I appreciate you, everybody that stopped by. Feel free to drop a follow. I'd appreciate it. Everything you do is really helpful. Your boy's very close to the affiliate. So appreciate you. Thanks, guys. I'll be back.